The following is an Operation Podcast production.
So many people are having issues with mitochondrial function. In fact, 94% of US adults have some element of mitochondrial dysfunction. And what that means is that they have a hard time either making energy in the mitochondria, or they have a hard time detoxifying from the energy that we make. The number one reason for mitochondrial dysfunction is insulin resistance, meaning people that don't have a well-optimized glucose transport system because they're having too much sugar on a regular basis. This is obviously diabetics, but even people that are insulin resistant. And this is over 3/4 of US adults just on that side of things. The key to understand here is that the cells in our body that require more energy, production, are going to have more mitochondria. So the number one energy production cell in the body, like the number one of the most mitochondria per cell, is actually in the eggs. So ovaries that produce eggs have the most mitochondria per cell. Sperm are not far behind because we have to swim a relatively far distance to go and fertilize the egg. And then you have the brain, the heart, the liver, musculoskeletal tissue has a huge amount in reserve, okay, because it has to have the capacity for you to make a lot of energy very quickly if you have to run away from something or run to something. Like our bodies are they're primed to be able to make energy when it's required, but they try to conserve it as much as possible as well. And that's going to become really important later when we talk about something called the cell danger response and how our body tries to shut down when we're under stress. Hello, my name is Dr. Scott Sherr. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Troscriptions. I'm an internal medicine physician, and welcome to EverForward Radio.
So you are not only an MD, medical doctor, but you are this expert, this authority in integrative health and longevity optimization. So why then is this such a central piece of the longevity and health optimization puzzle today?
I was thinking about this recently. My daughter I have a daughter in 7th grade, actually daughter in 8th grade and daughter in 9th grade right now. And in 7th grade, they start learning biology. And so you start learning about the cell. You learn about the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell. And when you learn about biology when you're in 7th and 8th grade, you learn about the cell, like the nucleus, the cytoplasm, and everything that's going on. And there's a picture of this one mitochondria in there that does all the energy production. But what you realize actually when you do more biochemistry and biology is that there are some cells in the body that have zero mitochondria. Actually, our red blood cells have zero mitochondria because they've gotten rid of it in their maturation process so they could carry more oxygen, interestingly enough. And you have other cells in our body that have thousands upon thousands of mitochondria per cell. And in total, we have quadrillions of mitochondria in our body.
Quadrillions.
I didn't make that up. That's a real word.
Wow.
Quadrillions. So trillions and then quadrillions. Okay. And so we have some cells in our body that have lots of mitochondria per cell. And we have other cells in our body that have very few or none. And so the key to understand here is that the cells in our body that require more energy, production, are going to have more mitochondria. So the number one energy production cell in the body, like the number one of the most mitochondria per cell, is actually in the eggs. So ovaries that produce eggs have the most mitochondria per cell. Sperm are not far behind because we have to swim a relatively far distance to go and fertilize the egg. And then you have the brain, the heart, the liver, musculoskeletal tissue has a huge amount in reserve, okay, because it has to have the capacity for you to make a lot of energy very quickly if you have to run away from something or run to something if you're going to try to kill it and eat it kind of deal. So you have to remember, we're very Paleolithic in our in evolution still. Like our brain still hasn't caught up to being in front of screens all the time, right? And so like our bodies are they're primed to be able to make energy when it's required, but they try to conserve it as much as possible as well. And that's going to become really important later when we talk about something called the cell danger response and how our body tries to shut down when we're under stress. But for now, know that we have a lot of mitochondria in some cells and we have a very few mitochondria in others. And so that energy production is something called ATP or adenosine triphosphate. So our energy currency in our body is called adenosine triphosphate. And so we make about 150, 165 pounds of ATP every single day. So it doesn't stay around for very long, but it's our energy currency. So everything that's required, reactions, enzymatic issues, conversions, everything that's happening in the body requires energy for the most part. And so the issue though, Chase, is that with that in mind, so many people are having issues with mitochondrial function. In fact, 94% of US adults have some element of mitochondrial dysfunction. And what that means is that they have a hard time either making energy in the mitochondria, or they have a hard time detoxifying from the energy that we make. Because these mitochondria, they're not like an electric powered car. They're more like a gasoline powered car in the sense that you put fuel into your gasoline powered car and you get exhaust or waste products at the end of that process. And so you make ATP, that energy currency, 150, 165 pounds of it, but you're also making water and carbon dioxide. It's very obvious. I think most people know that. And you're also making something called reactive oxygen species. These are small free radicals or small reactive oxygens that are made in the process of making energy. And these are what we call signaling molecules at small amounts. But at higher amounts, they're actually inflammatory themselves and cause inflammation in the system. So if you don't have enough antioxidants around to balance that stress that happens when you create energy, then you're going to have a dysregulation and inflammation over time. So many of us are living with brain fog, with chronic fatigue, with chronic pain, with just chronic, with chronic issues, with cardiac issues or musculoskeletal in the sense of like being able to exercise. Like these are all in their inherent base, a mitochondrial problem. And then from there, you have to understand, well, why is the mitochondria not working very well? And, I said 94% of US adults don't have really optimized mitochondria at this point. And so the majority of the reasons are as follows. The number one reason for mitochondrial dysfunction is insulin resistance, meaning people that don't have a well-optimized glucose transport system because they're having too much sugar on a regular basis. This is obviously diabetics, but even people that are insulin resistant. And this is over 3/4 of US adults just on that side of things. Because when you have too much sugar around, the mitochondria are trying to make more energy with that sugar because that's what's actually one of the substrates, one of the things that goes into the mitochondria to help us make energy. And so you have too much of it, you make too much energy, the system starts getting stressed and gets depleted in antioxidants, et cetera. Also, not only just insulin resistance, but things like medications that we take, things like proton pump inhibitors like omeprazole or Protonix or birth control pills and others actually affect mitochondrial function pretty dramatically, actually. Then you have infections, which can be big, like things like COVID or mold or Lyme. Then you have toxins in our environment, like the food, the water, the cosmetics, and the lighting and everything else that's toxic, that's affecting our mitochondria. And then you have a bigger bucket, which we'll talk about later too, called stress, which is stress from the environment, stress from people, from places, from things, from events. All these things can build up and cause significant mitochondrial function too. So it's probably a longer answer than you were interested in, but
no, this is great. I mean, already we've gotten this mitochondrial, mini masterclass right there. Thank you for explaining all that. In your description there, in your answer, two questions really came to mind for me. One, you were sharing 94% of Americans, 3/4 of Americans with different statistics there. All I heard was majority of Americans suffering from X, Y, and Z. So my first question is, why do you think we are talking about majority statistics here in this battle for mitochondrial health, general health in America? And two, do you think people are suffering more from having healthy and energetic, energy producing mitochondria, or the latter, not being able to go through that waste recycling process you're talking about?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. So to take your first question, the why is a big question as far as why there are so many people with mitochondrial dysfunction. But it's just, unfortunately, we are not evolutionary. We're not really at the place evolutionarily to be able to take all these inputs that's happening on a daily basis, everything from our food, our water, our environment, our stress. We are not evolutionary programmed to be able to tolerate all these things.
Oh, good. So it's not our fault. It's not our fault. We can take a step back, right?
Of course. Yeah. It's
the world around us.
There's nothing we can do about it, right? Of course. No, of course, there's many things we can do about it. But the problem is that humans are not programmed to think long term. They're programmed to think about what's going to help them survive today and tomorrow. And so we don't think about how we can, culture, or how we can, a good example of this is processed food, right? And so the way the processed food is made is to be highly caloric, highly palatable. And so if we had found this in nature 10,000 years ago, like this would have been the optimal food for us, because like we would have been able to eat it and we'd be able to survive for like
if we weeks. Found a Cheez-It tree.
Like you would have survived so much longer, because you would have had more calories, right? So it's just like we are just programmed from an evolutionary perspective to really want calories, to really want to sit down and not move, for example, because evolutionarily, if we had time to sit and relax and not be either have to find food or get chased by things that wanted to eat us as food, like that was the time that we would relax, right? So there's really great studies on all of these things and looking at the evolutionary biology of the human being and how we are really programmed to not want to survive for long periods of time. Really, all we want to do is survive enough for the next day, or long enough for our kids to be old enough so that they can survive on their own. So we have to really do a lot of work in understanding that we have to be able to be really cognizant of that. The way that the world is actually around us now is not making us healthy. It's not programmed to make us healthy. It's actually programmed to make us sicker and sicker and sicker, because it just throws our evolution into these sort of wormholes of what we love, like dopamine hits, like food that's so processed, not sitting around, not doing anything, feels so good on the couch for long periods of time, right? Because that's what our body wanted evolutionarily. So we're always having to reprogram ourselves in new ways of understanding that we need to get back to those kinds of mechanisms at play that are keeping us healthy. And so that's not easy, but it is something that we all have much more control over than we think we do. Like, we don't have to go and have fast and processed food every day. Or if we don't have a lot of money, there are other options that are going to be better for you than others. Right? We can take a walk around the block. We can get a little bit of sun. We can learn how to de-stress and not be in stress mode all the time. And that's a big one too, Chase, is because back, evolutionarily, we would have these kinds of stresses where we were stressed for a period of time, but then we'd have time when we were not. So we were able to oscillate, to go back and forth between a stressed period versus an unstressed period. And if you've ever watched National Geographic, where you have animals that get chased by like a prey, like they're being preyed on, a predator is trying to chase them, and then somehow the predator does not get the animal. They go through this like crazy, like shaking stress response to de-stress very quickly. So animalistically, we should be able to do the same thing. But then we have the new meeting. We have our kids. We have to make dinner. We have to figure out what to do on the weekend. We have the whatever it is that you have that just kind of stack up. And then we never go through that parasympathetic, that rest and digest. So that would be the answer to your first question, is that evolutionarily, we're not programmed to live in the world we are, and that we have to really do a lot of our own work to reprogram ourselves in this world to optimize our physiology. And most of us just aren't doing it on a regular basis. And then the second answer to your question, or to your second question, which is, where are most people having issues, which is either on the energy production or detoxification side. That takes like just a small biology lesson, which is that in the mitochondria, you have something called the electron transport chain, which is these chain of proteins that are working together to help collect electrons from the food you eat, actually carbohydrates and fats primarily, and then proteins if needed. And those electrons, they go through this electron transport chain to make a gradient to help you create energy from the gradients, basically. And so that whole process of making energy, from taking those electrons from your food to getting them in the electron transport chain, is very often dysfunctional for a lot of people. And often on the other side of the detoxification side, that's the part that typically is okay for a while. But that's the part that starts getting deteriorated over time when you're making too much energy, or you have too much stress on the system. So it's hard to say like which one is the majority of people, but I would say that oftentimes when you're looking to address and optimize mitochondrial function, you want to do it on both sides. You want to be addressing what's happening on the energy production side and on the detoxification side. Because if you just enhance energy, but you don't have enough detox capacity, you're not going to feel good. And this is people that will crash and burn when they take things, or crash and burn after exercise, for example. And on the other side, if you just give somebody antioxidants without giving a lot of energy production enhancement capacity, you're not going to see a lot of benefits there long term. You might see some short term benefits, but you probably won't see any long term because you're not really focused on that energy enhancing side.
This picture came to mind for me. I don't know why plumbing, but I had to imagine like on the front end, if you can enhance or increase the energy production, it's like all of a sudden you got a faucet that you doubled the spigot size or doubled the water pressure size. So it's great if you need or want more water or power coming out of that. But then if you don't do anything on the drain side, then you've got twice the force, twice the amount of volume energy coming through, but the same exit side. So you're going to like have all this energy and power for a little while, but then it's just going to start backing up, right? And then what do? You got a mess. Well, if you go the other route and you double the exit valve or double the exit pipe, then you're just going to have it all flow out that much more quickly. So it's kind of, I don't know why this image came to mind,
no, it's a good one. I like it. I like it. I think on the second example there you made. It's like you still have the same drip that's coming through. So you're going to have an initial period where you're going to do a lot of actually cleanup because you've had a lot of sort of buildup over time. So initially you're actually going to feel better, which is obviously helpful, but long term, you still have that like little drip going through the faucet. So it's not a lot of energy. So just kind of finish up your analogy, which I like. That's cool.
Yeah. So you can work on one and it can solve a problem temporarily, or maybe even seem like or feel like improvement. And it might actually be, but again, it's just a quick fix here and now. So really we got to work on increasing the energy in and how it's processed on the way out, which leads me to my next question. What do you think are some of the most common or atypical early warning signs that our mitochondria are not functioning optimally?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one of those things that, for most people is going to be a slow burn, in the sense that it's not going to be like one day you wake up and you have severe brain fog, chronic fatigue, muscle joints are aching, and there's just a lot of things going on. Typically, it's going to be a slow one, which it can be harder for people because we're all very busy. We have lots that are going on. So it could be as simple as that you're not recovering as quickly as when you go to the gym, for example. Like you feel like you used to recover within a couple, maybe a day, and now it's taking you 2 to 3 days, or maybe a day and a half or a little bit longer. You also feel like your energy might not be as consistent throughout the day. Like you used to have good energy throughout the day. Like maybe you had a little bit where you felt a little bit mildly just like tired maybe during the day, but now it's
get like that afternoon slump.
Yeah, the afternoon slump, right? Like usually it's mild, but then it's getting worse. You're also feeling like maybe your temper or your mood is more labile, which means it's going up and down more often, which means like you're not able to be as consistent. And so you might be happy one minute and then like a little bit more frustrated.
I've never heard this before. I've never heard this aspect of energy production, energy recycling. We're talking about mitochondria here, actually relate to mood. This is pretty shocking.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great sort of corollary to this. There's a whole world of metabolic medicine where they're actually putting people with schizophrenia, depression, and other mental health disorders on the ketogenic diet, for example, which is
this reminds me of Brain Energy from Dr. Chris Palmer a bit. It's kind of similar work. Yeah,
similar work, exactly. And so that whole work is sort of the foundation of that is mitochondrial dysfunction. And so if you can work with dietary changes, lifestyle changes, you can shift somebody's biochemistry and the mitochondria and help them work better. And then you're going to actually have a much more functioning brain, and depression can go away and anxiety can go away. I mean, I've had people, even a couple of weeks ago, a practitioner friend of mine is like, I started taking, something for the mitochondria, methylene blue, which we'll talk about, and my anxiety went away. And you wouldn't think that necessarily from this particular compound, but the idea here in general is that these symptoms of mitochondrial dysfunction, fertility, right? So I talked about eggs and sperm. Fertility rates are going down dramatically. And this is because of sperm quality and also from egg quality related to mitochondrial dysfunction. So again, it's not just saying that, okay, oh, poor you have mitochondrial dysfunction. There's nothing to do about it. There are things we can do about it. We'll talk about it, I promise. But fertility rates going down, mental health disorders going up, cardiovascular disorders going up, liver disorders, like things like liver detox issues, especially, fatty liver is another one.
Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. NAFLD is it's called. I think there's a new name for it now too. These are all related to sort of mitochondrial issues because your liver needs a huge amount of mitochondrial function to be able to detoxify. And if you're causing a huge amount of stress on the liver because of a really poor diet or a lot of alcohol, that's going to cause significant amounts of mitochondrial dysfunction. So also joint pain and muscle aching too, because again, what I mentioned is that especially the muscle aching piece is that the mitochondria have a huge amount of reserve in your muscle tissue when you need to run away from something, for example. And so these are some of the sort of more lower grade things that you might be seeing. It might not be huge. You might just realize, why am I more reactive? Why am I like more sad than I used to be? Or like, why does it feel like I just have more of a temper than I ever have in my life? Right. And, this is difficult because we're all going through life changes all the time. Maybe we have kids, maybe we have to help with our parents, or maybe we're just having a hard time at work and things are just really busy. So it's not just like you can think about this in one isolated day. It's more about the trends that you're seeing over time. These are some of the symptoms that you want to be looking out for.
So I'm so glad you bring this up, because another question I wanted to get to for sure when we talk about mitochondria is, for honestly someone like myself, knock on wood, grateful at least right now, and I think a lot of people in my audience, is we are seemingly doing, quote, everything right. We have healthy habits. We're prioritizing movement and hydration and sleep.
Sure.
Of course, life gets in the way here and there, but for the most part, we have this foundational health aspect covered, but we chalk it up to life or stress or getting older or just for whatever inexplicable reason. It's like I'm doing everything right, but I'm not where I want to be, or I don't feel like or perform like or recover like I used to. Could this be mitochondrial decline? Could this mitochondrial health revitalization and, to use a big word here, autophagy, this recycling, this waste byproduct process, could this be the missing link?
So when it comes to the mitochondria, because they're making so much energy, even if you're optimized overall, you're still creating those waste products over time. And your mitochondria will become more dysfunctional as you age, no matter what overall, if you're not actually looking at optimizing them from a cellular level too. And this is what the other aspect of it is, that we have to be testing actually what's happening in the cells themselves to really know what's going on. And because a lot of these more subtle deficiencies, more subtle toxicities may not even manifest for years and years and years, but they're still happening on the cellular level, and we can compensate for them very well up until the time that we can't. And as we get older, it's much harder to compensate for these kinds of things. But you can look at vitamin, mineral, nutrient deficiencies. You can look at toxicities in the body, things like heavy metals, for example. You could think of your omega-3s and your omega-6s as fish oils, and your omega-6 oils, and understand that all these things are playing a role in your cellular health. And this is a big component of mitochondrial health too, of course. And so even if you're feeling well, what one of my colleagues, Dr. Ted, actually, who's one of the founder of a couple of our companies, likes to say, which I think is important, is just because you don't feel bad doesn't mean, you're actually doing well underneath the hood, right?
Right.
And
yeah.
So just because you're not sick doesn't mean you're well. It just means you're not sick, is the actual quote.
How many people, unfortunately, do we hear they're upright, they're mobile, they're fine, they're active, they're doing their thing, and then they go to the doctor and say, "Oh, you've got a blockage. Oh, you're this close to having a heart attack," or God forbid, they do. Right. This is kind of the silent killer stuff we're talking.
She was so healthy, right?
Yeah.
And so the key is that you can be thinking that you're doing all the right things, but that's not enough, is what it comes down to. In addition to that, doing a really deep dive in foundational biochemistry, looking at vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and cofactors, looking at antioxidant status, looking at your gut health, which is a big part of your immune system and inflammatory dysregulation if it's not going well, looking at neurotransmitters, looking at hormones. Like, these are things that I think everybody needs to start thinking about more in a holistic way. And the problem, of course, if you go to a conventional doctor, they're not going to do a lot of this kind of testing. They're going to be looking at disease focus markers, making sure you don't have diabetes, making sure you don't have colon cancer, making sure you don't have other cancers depending on your age. But they're really not looking at keeping you healthy and optimizing that full cellular foundation. And that's what mitochondrial medicine, that's what metabolic medicine is really all about. And then the focus, in my clinical practice really is how you can optimize somebody between. What we're looking to do really is optimize these networks that are happening, these vitamins, minerals, nutrients, cofactors in the mitochondria, what's all happening with antioxidants and et cetera. And then looking at optimizing these levels between the ages of 21 to 30 as much as possible. So you want to be normal for a 55-year-old or a 45-year-old. You want to be optimized for those ages, which really would be that you're optimized to when you're the most able to be resilient, the most able to fight, to fornicate, and to do what you want and wake up the next day and feel very resilient, right? And that's typically between 21 to 30. And so when I think about optimization, that's what I think about. I think about cellular optimization in that age range and doing it in a very holistic way. And because that, I've seen this a number of times over the years, Chase, where people come in like, yeah, I feel really healthy. I'm doing great. I've had a couple actually elite athletes in this category that said, yeah, I feel great. I just want to see if I can optimize any further. And like, they're so close to just breaking down. And it starts with that injury that doesn't start getting better as fast as they used to get better, right? And then they can't play for a couple of weeks longer than they couldn't play before. And then they get another injury, and then another one, and then another, and then they're done, right? And then their career is over. And then I've seen this on a number of occasions where if you can get early to the system before there's a manifestation of some of these things more overtly, then you can really start changing and shifting that whole path significantly. And that's the optimal, right? You find things before they really start becoming an issue. But even if things are an issue, say you have conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, or whatever, it doesn't mean you can't start reversing a lot of these things. You can, with looking from a cellular foundation first and then optimizing there for all the sort of metrics that I mentioned. So it's never too late I would say. Even if you have cancer, for example, there's a lot you can do to build up your immune system and optimize from a cellular perspective to optimize your cancer treatment and recover at a higher rate. But the best case scenario in the kind of person that you're talking about that's doing everything right, in quotes, optimizing their hydration, their sleep, their diet as best they can. Of course, having days and maybe weeks when they're not doing that for various things. It's not enough. It's really not enough because there's so much more that could be going on under the hood that you just don't know about unless you're testing and seeing what's going on.
Yeah, I'm so glad you bring that up. That's one of, I think, the best recommendations I could ever give and ever give out to my audience or a friend or on social media. Say, hey, what's the best thing I can do for my health? First of all, I think that's very personal and relative, and any good coach or respected scientific community member, I think, would go, well, it depends.
Sure.
But after that, it would be get your labs. You gotta take a look under the hood. Personally, I get my labs drawn twice a year just to kind of get an advanced metabolic panel, hormonal panel. I had genetic labs drawn a couple of years ago. Someone like myself, and again, like a lot of people in my audience who are doing a lot of the things right, getting that snapshot once a year minimum, maybe twice a year is paramount. It helps me navigate small little changes in what I'm doing, really what I'm eating, based on my unique genetic and, unique biomarkers that really move the needle in a big, big way. So definitely get your labs drawn, people. Go get a physical, bare minimum. Go to your doctor, get a physical, get those bare minimum labs. But, beyond that, if you could blanket statement here and say, this is the number one thing most people are doing or can do, again, most people here, that will dramatically influence and increase the vitality of their mitochondria, really support them in a big, big way. What is it? And the opposite, what do you think is the one thing most people are doing nowadays that is secretly hurting, if not killing, their mitochondrial health?
Well, I think the answer is actually the same for both questions, Chase, and that is sympathetic overactivation, chronic fight or flight. What I mean by that is that most of us are living right now in a state where they're in a sympathetic activation. The sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight nervous system. It's the one that's supposed to be active when we're getting chased by a lion or have to save somebody's life because they're underneath a car, for example. It's not the nervous system that we're supposed to be living with 24/7. The parasympathetic nervous system, which is the other aspect of what's called our autonomic nervous system, is our rest, digest, detoxify, and heal and recover nervous system. And most of us are not living in that parasympathetic mode very much at all. And so if you can manage the capacity for your nervous system to be regulated more optimally, so you sympathetically are sympathetic when you need to be, and you're parasympathetic most of the time, that's when you're going to be when you're giving the most support to your mitochondria on a regular basis. Because what happens is that when you're sympathetically overdriven, which is you're always in that fight or flight, you're always in that hustle mode. And look, I know this mode, and I'm sure you know this mode very, very well, Chase, right? So in medical school, when I was in my residency, we had shirts that were made that said sleep is for quitters. This is not uncommon as a medical student. I was in rotations where I was on what's called Q3. I was on 30-hour shifts every 3 days for weeks at a time. And this was a badge of honor, right, to do these kinds of things. And so it's our culture. I grew up in New York as well, the hustle culture, the city that never sleeps. So people just don't know how to relax anymore and calm down. And they don't realize that, from even on the healthier side of things, that you need to push and try to build more muscle, for example. But if you don't relax and calm down and activate that parasympathetic nervous system, you can't build muscle. You can't actually make gains at the gym.
Muscle growth happens when you're not working out, when you're recovering, when you're resting. That's when the growth happens.
Exactly. Right. And that's what I always tell people sort of in the high performance space is you need to do less, not more. And you actually are going to gain more if you can actually create what I call sympathetic reserve. So what that means is that you actually can push and do more during your workout. But after your workout, you calm the fuck down. You relax, right? Lay down on the ground, put your feet up, do a meditation. You just do this a couple times a week instead of going bam into meetings, bam into your kids. you're going to see massively bigger gains. Now, I mean, they may not you might not become, 200 pounds if you're 160 overnight, but you're going to see gains. Okay. And you're going to see that your recovery goes better. And so the big issue here with that sympathetic overactivation is that you release a bunch of hormones and neurotransmitters that super stress your mitochondria over time. And as a result of that super stress in the mitochondria, they're going to start getting more dysfunctional. And if I had to give one thing to people to do, would be to learn how to manage stress in their life. And that's a big topic, right? And there's a lot of things that are involved within that aspect of things, but we can get back to that in a little bit. But what I'm trying to drive at here is where the mitochondria really come in play is that you have things like norepinephrine and epinephrine, which are neurotransmitters that get released when we're in fight or flight. You have another hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone. So we need cortisol. Cortisol rises when we get up in the morning. It helps us wake up. And it's supposed to go down in the evenings to help us,
Supposed to.
Yes. People with that 2 or 3 o'clock waking up thing often have a strong cortisol rise at that time. And that's almost always related to this stress response where you're in this sympathetic overdrive and don't know how to get out of it. And so, but when cortisol is very high for long periods of time, it causes a lot of stress on the mitochondria. And you have all these reactive oxygen species, that oxidative stress that happens when you make energy, remember those waste products that I was talking about. You have that antioxidant capacity that's supposed to be there. And so these are things like vitamin C and glutathione, even melatonin. People don't think of melatonin as an antioxidant. It's one of your most powerful antioxidants in your mitochondria. So if you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, you're sympathetically dominant all the time, your mitochondria go into this sort of stress response mode called the cell danger response. And the cell danger response is this evolutionarily conserved way of trying to protect you from actually dying by actually decreasing the amount of energy that you make. And as a result of that, you're making less energy, but your system needs more. And so the system gets even more stressed in the whole process. And this is what I often refer to as something called the sympathetic spiral of doom. And it is very ominous sounding, but there are many ways to break this pattern and this cycle. But the key to understand is that the majority of us, unfortunately, are living in this sympathetic overdrive that's causing this deficiency and the overall lack of energy capacity in the mitochondria at the same time.
I want to get into this sympathetic spiral of doom. I think it's just a very catchy way to get our attention about something that can really spiral out of control if we let it. But it's also very, I think, reassuring to hear that, by just awareness today, we can begin to make small changes that compound pretty quickly to really take our daily energy, our daily life back. But again, over time, we're adding years of health span and lifespan potentially here. But one other thing I want to highlight what you were just talking about there, Scott, is that by also doing that, we're doing a major benefit to our HRV, our heart rate variability. The more we can, regulate, get back into that parasympathetic, that I'm here, I'm cool, calm, and collected, I'm resting and digesting, I'm not stressed out or significantly less stressed out. We're significantly contributing to a higher heart rate variability. Now, I measure mine through a wearable called Whoop. There are a lot of different ways to do that, but just even if you don't measure it quantitatively, you got one too. Just know, the Oura Ring. Yeah. Another great tool. Just know that you are getting back into regulation, and why that's important. Well, for a lot of different reasons, but especially another theme here in our episode today is longevity. And we're now looking, because we know what HRV is, and we have enough years of looking at the data now. People might have heard of blue zones, right? Centenarians, people that are living to 100, past 100, and living well. Like they're still out farming, walking around, living their life, 100, 105, 110. We're now seeing, and one of the other big factors is that they have high HRVs. And when you look at their lifestyle, I think objectively you could say they know how to come back to rest and digest. They prioritize meditation. They prioritize community. They prioritize slowing down just as much, if not maybe even more, than the go, because they know how important that is. So it's amazing how you can focus on one thing with your health and your wellness, and that one thing can get infinitely better, but it has infinite cascade effects to so many other, if not every other system in the body. And again, if you do that today, you do that tomorrow, do that for a year, man, like that's what living life ever forward is all about. That's what the show is all about. So it hypes me up, man. It hypes me up to know that, we're bringing awareness to these key levers that actually move the damn needle in our life, regardless of our goals. So let's get back into, let's scare everybody a little bit more. Let's go back to the sympathetic spiral of doom. You were kind of just talking about these factors of chronic stress and sleep deprivation, and even overtraining can horribly reduce our mitochondrial reserves. Are these the first signs then that someone is stuck in this sympathetic spiral of doom? More importantly, what's the fastest way to break it? How do we get out of it?
Yeah, I think that I love just to comment on the HRV aspect of things, Chase, because I think that it's a great indicator of what we're talking about here, which is that you're in chronic stress mode. And if you're chronic stress mode, your HRV is going to be poor. The thing about HRV just to be careful of is it's like, people have a lot of different wearables and things like that. They have the Whoop, they have the Aura and everything. And it's hard to, don't worry about your absolute number of HRV is what I always tell people, because they're always worried about like, oh, my HRV is 40 and my friend's HRV is 80. I'm like, yes, that's okay. But the key is to understand how you can move that HRV over time doing various kinds of things, like going back into parasympathetic mode. So I get a lot of questions about that all the time. I have friends with HRVs of like 160, and I have other friends that have HRVs of around 50 or so. And I don't really, the number itself is not as important as the trends over time as you're doing various things. And one thing that I do very much when I work with my patients, when I work with patients in my clinical practice, is understand that HRV when we're getting started, and then look at their HRV over time as we're doing various things together. They're obviously the ones doing the various things, and I'm just encouraging them to do those things over time. And then seeing how that HRV changes is a great metric to understand this sympathetic spiral a little bit. So I think what's important when thinking about the sympathetic spiral of doom is that, I always think there should be music after I say the actual
dun dun dun.
Title of that. Exactly. Yeah. Is that there is a couple different ways that this spiral can start occurring. Okay. The most common way that this spiral starts is with sympathetic activation, with a body and brain that is just over sympathetically activated too much, right? Always in the go mode, always in stress mode. And this could be something that can be from work. It could be from family, but it can also be things from when you were a child and had, unfortunately, trauma or like PTSD and other kinds of things where you're kind of stuck in this mode for long periods of time without even knowing that you're in it. And this is not uncommon. I was just, the statistics of child abuse for women are just ridiculous. Like 1 in 3 girls will be abused in their life. And it's crazy, and then these kinds of things, like there's tons of literature on this, like the body keeps the score over time. And where's the body keep the score is in a feeling of feeling unsafe. If you're feeling unsafe, you're going to be in chronic fight or flight a lot of the time. And this is a problem. It's a huge problem, right? And so understanding why can be difficult sometimes, but this is a really big lever that you can push over the long term, which is, trying to get to the root of why that stress is such a problem. Sometimes it's just relatively easy to address, and other times it can be very difficult. So you can get into the sympathetic spiral because of that sympathetic activation piece directly, or you can get in it because the mitochondria take a huge hit because of something. Say it's medications, say it's toxins in our environment, say it's insulin resistance, say it's another aspect of where you're causing mitochondrial dysfunction. The big one I've seen actually over the last several years is actually infection, where people get an infection, like say they have a COVID infection, they have mold, or they have Lyme. And this is not a direct sympathetic activation. This is actually a direct hit on the mitochondria itself. And so then what happens is because that there's a direct hit on the mitochondria, it causes a stress response in the body because the mitochondria are under stress mode. That's called the cell danger response. And so you have a direct hit on the mitochondria that causes sympathetic activation. So, but either way, whether it's happening with the sympathetic activation directly or the mitochondria taking a hit, you become into this spiral where it's very difficult to break. As I was mentioning earlier, that sympathetic activation causes mitochondrial dysfunction itself, even if the mitochondria are already stressed because they were in this place where they got infected, whether there's an infection or there's toxins or something in the environment that caused it. And so the key is that you want to break this spiral now. Okay. And then it may be more subtle. It may not, like some of those symptoms that we were talking about earlier, like the mild brain fog, the concentration problems, like the joint pain, the muscle aches. These may be signs that this is actually happening at low grade. And it hasn't gotten to the place where you're in bed, or you can't function after a walk around the block, or that your mood is all over the place, or you have a mental health disorder. Okay. So there's a huge spectrum here, right? And so, but the key, no matter where you are in that spectrum, really is to try to break this as fast as possible, and as holistically as possible too. And so when I think about these things, in my clinical practice, what I'm thinking about here is, well, how can we downregulate that nervous system for somebody right now, so they can actually feel what it feels like to not be in that stress mode. Okay. And so that is a very interesting experiment with people, because when you downregulate somebody's nervous system and give them the experience of feeling calm, that actually can create anxiety in itself for people.
Yeah. I've been there. I've been there. Yeah. It's a really interesting place to be put into a place, first of all, to show you physiologically, mentally, and even emotionally of, a calm state is possible, especially when navigating mental health concerns and issues. When you don't believe that that's possible, it just exacerbates mental health issues. But then when you can get to a place where you actually are cool, calm, collected, you're in a safe place, and your guard gets let down, your nervous system relaxes, like, I didn't know this was possible. It can be anxiety inducing, because then it's just this whole other spiral of, well, what's preventing me from getting there? Why haven't I gotten here before? How do I stay here? Right. You would just want to grab hold of things and never let go, because you didn't think that relief was possible. It's a really tricky place to be. So how do you navigate people, through that?
So very carefully, what it comes down to, because if you know clinically that it's very likely somebody's going to have this reactive stress response, you have to be there with them, or have people with them while they're trying things to help downregulate their nervous system, so that they feel safe. Safety is probably the biggest piece when you downregulate the nervous system. The nervous system overactivation is often because we feel unsafe in some way, right? We feel unsafe that we're not going to finish the work for the day. We feel unsafe because we were unfortunately traumatized in war. We feel unsafe because we had a bad experience when we were a child in some way too. And so that safety is such an important piece. And what I always try to sort of, I guess, the story that I give my patients when I talk about this, and friends and colleagues, is that the key is to actually bring somebody down there in a safe way. And then from there, be able to know where there is, which is like, this is the place that we can get you over time, as we are able to understand the why behind why you're sympathetically overdriven, but also, give you some things along the way that are going to help you. Like, let's optimize that sympathetic system that is so overactive. And that really is oftentimes leveraging what's called the GABA system in the brain. GABA is a neurotransmitter. It's our primary inhibitory or relaxing neurotransmitter. The brain is the brakes of our brain. And so for many of us, the brakes just don't work anymore. We're like one of those trucks that's going down the hill and the brakes are gone, and we don't have an off ramp to like stop our truck from going in and doing the whole Thelma and Louise kind of thing. And so we have to think about these brakes, and we're not doing it. And GABA's the unsung neurotransmitter. We know about dopamine and serotonin and epinephrine and norepinephrine. Like, those are the superstars, but GABA is actually what regulates them all from a brake performance perspective. And so it's a big deal. And so what I typically do is I leverage the GABA system very quickly in patients of mine, and also my friends and colleagues that need it, to downregulate that nervous system very quickly. And then over the long term, optimize their whole system, from a vitamins, minerals, nutrients, from a gut health perspective, and all the things that are involved in the GABA system, but even more in a broader range, of course, than the mitochondria as well. Because the other issue here, Chase, is that if you give this parasympathetic experience to people, and their mitochondria are still in this sort of cell danger response and dysfunctional, they're still not going to feel very good. And so the key really is to also address and support mitochondria at the same time.
I want to kind of shift gears a little bit as we get right towards the end here before I ask my final question. I'm curious to know a little bit more about you. You've dropped some incredible knowledge on us about mitochondria and methylene blue. You run a practice, you're with patients, you're doing the damn thing. But what about you? What's your favorite biohack or one supplement that for you moves the needle, a biohack that moves the needle, or a supplement that you just can't give up?
My goodness. Okay. There's so many ways to answer this question. How much time do I have? Like a minute? Or what do you think?
We're going rapid fire-ish.
Yeah. Okay, right? Rapid fire-ish. Okay. I would say that foundational things every day are so important for all of us. Make good habits that keep you healthy and don't make you sicker. Right. And so whatever those are, for me, it's breaks between meetings, it's getting out in the sun, it's playing with my kids, it's trying to get into my infrared sauna every single night. That's probably my biggest, quote unquote biohack, is that I love the infrared sauna. Because
why at night for you?
For me, it's my wind down. It's my capacity to just wind down the nervous system and prepare for bed, because, sleep is kind of a big deal, everybody, right? If you don't sleep well, you are not going to feel well throughout the day. It causes a significant amount of stress on the mitochondria, actually, specifically. And so sleep is one of the biggest levers that you can pull to try to actually optimize mitochondrial function. And so we often say at Troscriptions that your day starts when you go to bed, not when you wake up. And the key with that is that the first thing on your list every day should be sleeping, not the last thing. And I'm guilty of this more than I'd like to admit sometimes, but over the years, I've become more intentional about my sleep, my sleep routine. And then the infrared sauna is a big part of that as my wind down as I'm getting ready for bed. And so what we like to say at Troscriptions, because Dr. Ted, our founder, and my colleague and mentor, he has like a nice saying that kind of, in general, what we want to do on a daily basis is we want to move well, sleep well, relate well, love well, sun well, ground well, and, have good sex as well. Sex well, right?
Yeah.
And so these are really important. Sex well, right? He sometimes says fuck well. I don't know if that's okay. But those are the foundation. And then from there, check your biochemistry. Like, know what's going on under the hood, because even if you're doing all those things, you may not be doing it as much as you actually think you can to fully optimize.
Or you can even throttle back on some things. That was actually a big eye opener for me. Whenever I get my labs, I'm like, oh, I actually don't need as much of this in my diet or in my supplementation, or I can actually give myself the grace to change up my workouts a little bit, whereas I don't need to be go as much as I thought, or just that grace and that freedom. Again, it's based on you. So get your labs.
Yeah, do some foundational testing. So we have a nonprofit called Health Optimization Medicine, and it's at homehope.org. And I'm trained in this whole clinical practice where we actually optimize from a foundational level. It's called the metabolomic level, vitamins, minerals, nutrients in real time in cells and your gut and neurotransmitters, hormones. And so it's kind of like, if people have heard of functional medicine, but the difference is that we're focused on optimizing the health of the system and bringing you back to when you were 21 to 30 years of age. So I don't really directly address disease or illness. I'm focused on optimizing your health. And as by doing that, the beneficial side effects are pretty dramatic, as you can imagine. But once you have a good foundation, then you can address the Lyme, you can address the mold and things like that. But if you have those things going on, but I work with a lot of performance athletes and, a lot of people that are trained in what I do work on the performance side. And I also work on people that are super sick and have, complex medical illness as well. And because you can see benefit no matter kind of where you are in that world, and getting really that focus shift to being optimized in that age range between 21 and 30.
You mentioned your kids. What's one thing maybe that you are doing with them, or you're trying to have positive influence on for them to kind of adopt their own healthy optimization lifestyle? What's a kid hack you have with them?
First off, with children, it's always important to remember they don't do what you say, they do what you do. So you have to model the right behavior. And again, we're not always going to be perfect at this, for sure. But as much as you can model behavior for your kids, the better. But the time that I can really do my ninja moves with my kids is typically before bed. Everybody's tired. Everybody's in bed. They're just kind of they're starting to wind down for sleep. That's when you can really have conversations with them about shifting their thought process, or having like a little nugget of philosophy or of meditation or of mindfulness. I do all these kinds of things with my kids, and it's been a great way for me actually to reflect on what I'm learning. Because the other major thing that I talk about with my kids all the time is meditation, learning how to observe your mind, I'm not talking about like sitting, with your legs crossed and like Buddha style. You can do that. But the real meditation in my integration with the life that I live is trying to have times where you just observe your thoughts and take space from them. As we talk about this all the time with my children before they go to bed, mindfulness, meditation, shifting in perspective, and of course, having a little bit of fun with some fancy and fanciful stories sometimes too, that actually bring these points to home as much as I can.
Yeah. Well, Scott, this whole conversation for me has just been a great eye opener to the reminder of how important these foundational aspects of our health are and how important they are for today, but more importantly, how much they compound over time. So what's good for our cells today, what's good for our healthy habits today, what's good for our mitochondria today are absolutely going to be necessary for tomorrow and 10 years from now. And we don't want to be looking back and going, I wish I did just that one thing. I wish I just did that one thing more days than I didn't. And it really kind of reminds me of this concept of our energy as currency and how are we spending it right now? More importantly, treat it like your finances. Where am I putting energy aside? How can I save more? How can I have more in reserve? How can I know that if I need to tap into something, I can down throttle, up throttle as needed and not be as taxing or taxing at all on my system as a whole? How can I really set myself up for success and know that I have all these resources at my disposal, so to speak? So if your energy was a currency, just think, everyone listening, watching right now, how are you spending it? How are you saving for it? How are you spending it? It's a crucial question to ask, which leads me to my last question, Scott. In your own words, how do you live a life ever forward? Those two words, ever forward, what do they mean to you kind of through your lens of what you do and how you do it? Put on our hat here over at Ever Forward Radio. Ever Forward, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I love what you guys do there, man. It's such great work you've been doing for so much time.
Thank you.
So I appreciate it. It's a really interesting dichotomy, which is when you're ever forward, you also have to be ever present in the moment too. Because if you're always thinking about the future, you're never here in the moment. And this is something I talk about with my kids all the time. And the present moment is all we have, guys and gals, right? And so if you're not living in that present moment, you're not here. You're someplace else. I mean, you're here like physically, but you're not actually here. And if you can live more in the present, your mind will be so much calmer. Your ability to actually oscillate and balance between your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system is going to go up dramatically too. And you'll be able to create space from that monkey mind that all of us have. I mean, we have on average about 70,000 thoughts every single day. Oof. Don't believe everything you think. Don't get wrapped up in these thought-generated pancake of thought, and you can't get out of these sort of racing things that this all happens to us, okay? But if you can be in the moment and live in the moment here, I'm not talking about like you only live once kind of YOLO stuff, and that's okay, and that's cool for certain circumstances. But in general, what I mean is just live in the now, like live here and be here. And this is something that I work on all the time, and it's not easy to do. So, but at the same time, you don't have to be content with where you are in your life while also being present in the moment.
Oh man, that's so powerful.
This is the real challenge. And this is something that meditation teaches, right? Which is that you can still work on your life to be better at the same time as being present now. And, there's a quote that, again, one of my colleagues and mentors is a very smart dude named Dr. Ted likes to say, is that happiness is the unconditional experience of now. Like knowing that just everything about it, no matter happy, sad, angry, like just this is where you are right now. But knowing that you can change in the future, right? You can also have, work on things, but your happiness is really just being present in the moment and just accepting everything as it is.
I love that. It's almost like, I'm going to paraphrase here, the unconditional commitment and unconditional promise to presence. The
unconditional internal acceptance of the way things are.
Acceptance, even better.
And that's his full quote right there. So the unconditional internal acceptance of the way things are, not that you have to keep things the way they are. You can work for things over time, but the unconditional acceptance of the way things are now, it's like a surrender to the moment kind of thing. And so being ever forward requires, I think, an acknowledgement of where we are now. But at the same time, working for the better. And so knowing also that we're not evolutionarily programmed to live a long life. We're evolutionarily programmed to live to the next dopamine hit, to the next thing that's going to let us survive.
Yeah. That's the bitter truth, right?
So living a long time requires us to think long term. And that's something that really does take work for all of us to do. And working with other providers, being in communities that are helpful and supportive, you have lots of options now. You're not in this alone at all. There's so many options for you there and now.
I got to highlight this in my notes. I love that last little gem right there. I want to make sure I don't forget that. That's the clip, everybody. I love it. Well, Scott, where can my audience go to connect with you, learn more about what you have going on in clinic, in research, and with Troscriptions and all the amazing mitochondria, methylene blue stuff?
Thanks for having me, Chase. It's been awesome. I really enjoyed the time. So the best place to find me is so I have a website, drscottsherr.com. It's DRSCOTTSHERR. That's where I have my clinical consulting on both the health optimization medicine piece that I mentioned with the metabolomics and the testing, along with work that I do in hyperbaric medicine if people are interested in that. Also links to my companies. The major company that really is the focus of this talk has been Troscriptions. Troscriptions is a company that we developed about 5 years ago. We have a number of different products that are based on things like methylene blue that we talked about today. We have a combination, one with methylene blue, nicotine, caffeine, and CBD called blue cannatine, which is fantastic for focus if you really want that stimulant kind of
feeling. This one's super interesting. This one and the Trocom are my two favorites personally.
I love that. Yeah. So blue cannatine is a great flow inducer, productivity focus for about 3 to 5 hours. Like it's great for a pre-workout as well. Like just a teeny bit of nicotine, which is not addictive in our doses, and a little bit of caffeine in there is fantastic. And Troscriptions.com is the website. And you can find us at Troscriptions on Instagram as well. I'm also at Dr. Scott Sherr on Instagram. Yeah. I should also just mention for the GABA stuff that we mentioned earlier in the podcast, Trocom is a great way to downregulate your nervous system right now. And it works without making you feel sedated as well. Yeah. So I use it all the time in clinical practice. I use that after podcast, after like really intense sort of brain energy work to kind of calm down. Even physical energy work is great too, as a way to calm down the nervous system, get that fight or flight down and go to that parasympathetic. So we have Trocom, we have Troz, which are great. Troz for sleep and Trocom's for like the sort of stress and tension and, physical anxiety during the day and cognitive as well. So you can check it out, Troscriptions.com, at Troscriptions, and then the nonprofits at homehope.org. So I guess, yeah.
We're going to have all that linked in the show notes for you guys and episode resources if you're listening, and in the description box on YouTube if you're watching. I have not yet tried the Troz, the sleep one yet. I'm excited to. Honestly, personally, I just, I've got a pretty good sleep hygiene routine. And so again, I feel like I don't need any extra help right now, but then again, I have an 8-month-old son, so that can change at the flip of a dime. So
with travel,
yes, good to know.
It's great for time zone changes. It has 8 ingredients in there, all low doses, all synergistic, and 2 that are working on the GABA system specifically.
Amazing.
But also a little bit of melatonin, which is good for travel, 5-HTP, CBD, CBN, which are cannabinoids that help with regulating mood and sleep as well. And then some things that are working on differently, the adenosine system and others. So it's really great, supportive for all your neurotransmitters, including GABA. So, regulate that nervous system, calm it down, perform better. I promise. It's kind of crazy, but it's true.
This is huge. I'm so sorry for going over our time with you here. Hopefully it didn't ruin the rest of your day. But Scott, this is amazing wealth of information. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching here and listening with us. That's a wrap for today's episode.